Have you ever wondered what happens when the faith you've built your entire life crumbles before your eyes? I'm Andres, and for nearly half of my 40 years, I was a priest in Mexico City. I grew up believing my destiny was to serve God within the church, but what I discovered over time changed everything. My story isn't about abandoning faith, it's about truly finding it, beyond stone walls and golden altars. It's a journey of doubts, secrets, and in the end, freedom. A freedom I never imagined possible until I lost everything I thought defined me. I come from a deeply Catholic family. My mother lit candles to the Virgin of Guadalupe every night, and my father took us to Mass every Sunday without fail. As a child, I looked at priests with admiration, convinced they were the men closest to God. There wasn't an exact moment when I decided to become a priest. It felt like something etched into me. While my friends dreamed of grand careers, I pictured the cassock, the pulpit, the chance to guide lost souls. At 18, I entered the seminary with a burning faith, ready to dedicate myself to the church. There, I learned the scriptures, theology, and rituals. They taught me that a priest was the bridge between heaven and earth, and I believed it with all my being. If you've ever felt that something in your life no longer makes sense, or if you've questioned what you were taught to believe, this story is for you. Subscribe to follow this journey with me, because what I'm about to share might change the way you see faith, truth, and even yourself. At 25, I was ordained a priest. I remember the day with almost tangible clarity. The incense filling the cathedral, the weight of the bishop's hands on my head, the peace I felt believing I was exactly where God wanted me. For years, I served with devotion. I baptized children, heard confessions, comforted the afflicted. The faithful trusted me, seeing in my words a reflection of divine will. I believed it too, but little by little, something began to shift. Faith is like a flame, it needs air to live. And within the church, the air was growing heavy, laden with silences I could no longer ignore. At first, they were small signs. Priests speaking with contempt about the faithful in private meetings, mocking their heartfelt confessions. Others seemed more interested in power within the hierarchy than in their flock. I tried to justify it. No institution is perfect, I told myself. But the cracks widened. One night in the sacristy, Father Esteban, a man I deeply respected, sat beside me and said in a low tone, "Don't ask too many questions, Andres. The church has survived wars and revolutions. God will sustain it." His words left me restless. Was it God sustaining it all, or were we convincing ourselves of that? I opened my Bible that night, seeking comfort. My eyes fell on Matthew. "Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." A chill ran down my spine. Was I starting to see what had always been there? In the days that followed, I couldn't ignore the whispers, the evasive glances, the closed doors. Once I overheard Father Esteban and Bishop Miguel talking in the parish library. "Can we keep ignoring this?" Esteban asked. "It's not our concern," the bishop replied sharply. The silence that followed weighed more than their words. I wanted to barge in, demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was late, and I was walking down the dark parish corridor when I saw Bishop Miguel with a man in a suit entering the sacristy. Something about their demeanor made me stop. I waited, hidden in the shadows. The door cracked open and I heard the bishop say, "The money will be ready before Sunday." The man handed over a thick envelope and left. Miguel counted its contents calmly, tucked it into his cassock, and disappeared. I stood frozen. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was administrative, but doubt had already taken root. The next morning I confronted Father Esteban in the cloister. "Father, there are things in the church that don't add up," I said. He sighed. "Andres, our task is to serve and obey. If you question, you'll end up alone." That haunted me. Alone? Lose my community? My purpose? But the truth was starting to shout louder than fear. Days later, during confessions, a young man entered the confessional. His voice trembled. "Father, I need help." He hurt me. My heart raced. "Who?" I asked. After an agonizing silence, he whispered a name, someone powerful in the church, someone I admired. He said God forgave him, the young man continued, sobbing. I promised I'd do something, but inside me, anger and despair were growing. That night I went to Bishop Miguel. I told him what I'd heard, without revealing the young man's identity. He listened in silence, then spoke coldly. It's not our job to judge, Andres, forget this. I stood incredulous. How can we turn a blind eye? He stared at me. If you keep this up, you'll regret it. I left his office dazed. The parish corridors felt suffocating. In the chapel I knelt before the altar, but God's silence was deafening. My crisis was just beginning. I tried pressing Father Esteban again, hoping for support. This isn't right, I pleaded. He looked at me sadly. We don't change the church, Andres, it changes us. His words echoed like a warning, but I couldn't pretend anymore. The superiors began treating me differently. My duties were reduced. Conversations stopped when I entered the sacristy. A young seminarian, Javier, warned me in secret. They're saying you ask too much. It's dangerous. Dangerous for whom? He didn't answer, but the emptiness in his eyes said it all. What hurt most wasn't the rejection from the priests, but God's silence. I prayed, but found only a void. Masses became mechanical. The words I spoke rang hollow. Before I felt God guiding me from the pulpit. Now it was as if I were lying to the faithful. I was excluded from important ceremonies, like the children's first communion. We want to avoid distractions, they said. Distractions from the truth, perhaps. I tried speaking to Bishop Miguel again, but his secretary blocked me. There's nothing to discuss, Andres. Case closed. That was a final blow. One night, returning to my room, I found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside, a single line in black ink. Be careful what you say. My heart pounded. It was a clear threat. I locked myself in and opened my Bible, desperate for guidance. I read in John, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The words hit me like lightning. If I wanted the truth, I couldn't stay where it was stifled. But leave? That meant abandoning everything. My identity, my home, my life. I didn't sleep that night. Fear consumed me. How would I live without the church? What would I tell my family? But something inside said the truth was worth more than security. I decided to read the Bible without the filters of tradition. I'd always studied it through the lens of doctrine, but now I wanted to hear God directly. I found passages that challenged what I'd accepted. Jesus spoke of a simple love, a faith without intermediaries. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am. No mention of hierarchies or rituals. One afternoon I passed a group praying in a plaza. No robes, no incense, just Bibles and sincere voices. A man saw me and said, "Welcome, brother." I stayed listening. Samuel, a young man from the group, approached. "You look thoughtful." "I'm a priest," I confessed, hesitant. He smiled. "Then you know the scriptures." He opened his Bible to Matthew. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It touched me deeply. God didn't call us to bear human traditions, but to live in His grace, he said. For the first time in months, I felt warmth in my chest. I returned to my room and prayed differently. "Lord, show me the truth." There was no audible reply, but a subtle peace enveloped me. My faith still burned, but my trust in the institution was crumbling. I made one last effort. I requested an audience with the Archbishop. If there was justice, it'd be at the top. He received me with a stern look. "I've heard you've been asking uncomfortable questions, Andres." I was direct. "Excellency, I've seen abuses, corruption, suffering. I can't ignore it." He sighed. "The Church has survived centuries because it knows its place. We're not here to question, but to uphold. Even when it's wrong," I countered. "Your mistake, son, is thinking you can change it. If you persist, there's no turning back." I left defeated. The church wouldn't change. I'd have to. That night, in the chapel, I knelt one last time. "Lord, what do you want me to do?" I recalled another passage. "Whoever loves their life will lose it, and whoever hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." I understood. To find God, I had to let go of what bound me. I wrote my resignation letter to Archbishop Miguel. Each word lifted a weight. I made it clear my faith in God remained, but not in the institution. I turned off the light and for the first time in years slept in peace. Leaving was like losing the ground beneath me. I woke up directionless, homeless, penniless. The news spread, and the priests I'd called brothers rejected me. "You betrayed the church," they said. My family didn't understand. I stayed in a cheap boarding house with little money. Loneliness swallowed me. I prayed but heard only silence. What if I'd been wrong but I couldn't return to the lie? One afternoon I passed a small church on the outskirts. It was simple, unadorned. Inside, people sang with fervor. A sign read, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I entered, knelt, and wept. Not from despair, but surrender. "Lord, do you hear me?" I felt an inexplicable peace. I wasn't alone. I lingered there. I met Ruben, a kind man. "No one comes here by chance," he said. I hesitated but returned to the meetings. "What is freedom, Andres?" Ruben asked one night. "Knowing Christ without religious chains." His words set me free. I read the Bible with them and saw Jesus never spoke of temples or hierarchies, but of a people united in his name. "There is one mediator between God and mankind, Jesus Christ," Ruben read from Timothy. I realized I didn't need rituals to find God. He'd always been with me. Ruben asked if I'd share my testimony. I trembled, but spoke. I told of my fall and redemption. When I finished, the brothers prayed for me. I was no longer a lost priest, but a son of God. One day, Ruben suggested my baptism. "I was baptized as a child," I said. "That was tradition. This is faith." I agreed. In the river, under the sun, I gave myself to Christ. Emerging from the water, I felt new. My mission wasn't to serve a religion, but to follow Jesus. If this story resonated with you, don't stop here. Subscribe to follow more testimonies like this. Let's discover together what it means to live a true faith, free from chains. Join me on this journey and find the freedom only Christ offers.